Hey guys, welcome back. It's Robocraft Early Access coverage. This is episode 9. I'm Enigmius, and today, talking about situational awareness. And this is one of those topics you see on forums pop up from time to time, and it usually turns ugly very, very quickly because there are people who get a little bit condescending in their use of it, and there are people who get extremely defensive at the suggestion that they're not doing something that they should be doing. There's really a no-win situation. People become very polarized, and it's not that complicated. It's just taking a look at the big picture. Because if all we see is the 3-inch circle around our reticule when we're looking for someone to shoot at, we're missing a lot of information that could define the difference between success and failure in any given encounter. So I decided to do this video because I actually had another one planned, but a patch came out and completely changed everything, so this is what we get. Now, there are 3 important things to think about when it comes to situational awareness. We've distilled it down into 3 important things. The idea is not that you either identify that you have this or you don't, and you don't, so you're always going to be awful, but to say, here's something you can take into a match, and you can practice. You can have it in the front of your mind. Today I'm going to practice whatever. And you'll either say, okay, now that I think about it in these terms, I actually do a fairly decent job of it. Or you'll say, I've never even thought of thinking about this before. And now that I have, the difference is enormous. It's usually either side of the pole. There aren't too many people that are somewhere in the middle. These are the kinds of things that you practice. I want to stress that. These, like I say, these are not things that you have or you don't. You go in with the mindset that you're going to practice it, and then you practice it until you feel comfortable at it, and then you practice it some more, because that's the difference between the guys who win a lot and the guys who don't. Now, the first thing, very, very important on this list, is to know your bot. Now, with a game like Robocraft, where you're essentially making your own vehicle, this is a little bit more difficult than it might sound. In other games where you're basically given a vehicle and the option to customize it a little bit, you at least have a basis to work with it based on what I'm given to start with. This particular thing, vehicle, person, whatever will be good at a particular role. In this case, you can build your own bot, and as was the case with me with my SMG hover sled, I built it with a particular role in mind and found that it worked much better in a different role, and the only way I learned that was by going into matches and finding what was working and what didn't, and finding that a lot of the things that didn't work were things that I thought the bot would be excellent for. So knowing your bot starts actually in the practice course, and I want to stress this enough because I can tell there are a lot of people out there. I'm just going to be upfront. People with really bad attitudes with regards to playing on a team that say, well, if I go to the practice course, I don't earn anything, but if I go to this match, even if I get blown up, I can probably earn something. And then they get to tier 6, or used to get to tier 6, and start losing and say, this sucks, I'm so mad about this. Now it's even easier. It's going to be even easier for people to march their whole way up using matches as practice maps because they get paid for it, as opposed to the practice maps where you don't. Use the practice maps because that's where you can really put your vehicle through its paces. You can see how it handles in various different situations. You can see how it manages different kinds of terrain. I guess terrain being that the practice map is generally one kind of material, but you can get an idea when are you driving over divots, are you driving over little holes, are you driving over flatland, uphill, downhill, with your vehicle slanted to the side, across a hill, all these different things that you could try, and then see how the vehicle turns when you're doing these things. See how the vehicle handles being in this kind of situation and then accelerating from a dead stop. There's all kinds of different things you can do to learn about the handling of your vehicle before you even fire a shot. And then, of course, you got the little puny bots that you can shoot at. That's not so much that, is my bot deadly? Is my bot going to kill everything that it lays eyes on? That's to see how your guns function together. Do they shoot the backs of one another? Do they shoot the vehicle more than they shoot the target? Are the guns oriented in a way that allows you to get a lot of fire onto a target when you start firing? Or, based on what you've seen, do you want to go back into the garage and mess around a bit more with the orientation to get something that you're happier with? Those are the things, like I say, you practice, and then you take it back to the garage and say, I wasn't happy with the way it was doing this, so let's see if I can tweak this, change that, move this, so that it does what I want it to do. then the next step is to get it into the matches. You know it's not going to flip over as soon as it arrives in the match because you've been into the practice course enough times. You know it's not going to flip over as soon as the match says go. You take it into a match and you start fighting the enemy and you find that what you have does exactly what you wanted it to do and you're very happy with it. That's the ideal situation. That's what I wish everyone could experience all the time. By the time they bring it into the first match, your bot does exactly what you wanted it to do. Most of the time you're going to find that it does some things the way you thought it would in some ways, and in other ways it doesn't function very well at all. That's where we go back to the garage and we ask ourselves, are we willing to leave it the way it is for now, or do we want to be making some changes? My bots tend to change fairly regularly when they're brand new going into matches. I make a lot of changes, usually after every match or every other match. And then as time goes on and I start to feel comfortable with the bot doing what it's supposed to be doing, that's when I start making tweaks and changes and additions. My SMG hover tank has shrunk actually a fair bit since I originally started bringing it into matches because I found ways to bring the guns in closer together without overlapping on one another. That was one of the big ones. One of the big reasons why it got so big was because it was the guns, having to have enough space for the guns to fit together without overlapping. There's always a change that you can make here. You can, in my case, definitely swap out some of the older armored chassis blocks for some of the newer ones, you know what I mean? Make things live a little bit longer. Realistically speaking, there's nothing wrong with keeping a functional bot the way it is and enjoying it, but we have to be realistic when we look at what our bot is doing and saying, is it really doing what we think it's doing, or is it just kind of making a mess? That's the key in terms of knowing your bot. Having a realistic understanding of what your bot is capable of, what it excels at, what its weaknesses are, and what you need to avoid. That brings us to the next stage. Once we're happy with our bot, is to know your team. Item 2 on the list of situational awareness is knowing your team. And we're not talking about knowing their names, their favorite colors, what kind of relationship they have with their mother. We're talking about taking a look around when a match is getting set to start and seeing what the other people have brought to the table. Have they brought a bunch of really beefy bots covered in electroplates with lots of guns that inspire you with confidence that these people are going to be the kind of ones that you're going to want to move with and support, or at least have at your back supporting you? Or are they a bunch of derpy little brick bots that are going to crumble at the first sign of plasma fire? Because there's a lot of those, even tier 6 and above. I was in my first tier 7 match last night. A lot of derpy little bots that just blow up. And then the people run to the forums and complain that whoever blew them up is overpowered. No, your bot was underpowered, and you paid the price for it, and your team was left down a bot very, very early on because derpy little brick bot couldn't handle it. That's one of the things you can't say to people, hey, you idiots, build better bots before you come into matches, because even if they're paying attention to chat, all they're going to say is screw you. You know, there's no room for that kind of discussion in game chat. And conversely, when you advance and you think your team's with you, and then they either all die because they're puny little bots that don't last very long, or they just see the enemy and run away, you can't say to them, thanks for not being anywhere useful, because again, they get upset. I'm sure there's a diplomatic way to say this to these people, but it assumes that they're actually going to be seeing things in chat. And if they can't see that they're failing over and over and over again because of their own stuff, then they're probably not seeing what's being said in chat anyways. It's just the way things go. Knowing your team is basically understanding whether or not you can count on them to support you, whether or not you need to be focusing on supporting them. And also, if you find yourself in a firefight against a bunch of enemies, do you want to stay and fight, or do you want to be recognizing that the rest of your team is either dead or running away and moving with them? Because that's kind of the way it goes. Is it's never your choice. Usually, as a leader, you've decided that you're the leader, and people are just going to naturally follow you. They're going to go where they think they're going to go because they don't have situational awareness. They're not thinking in terms of the team. They're out of there. They're gone. They're dead or they're gone. You have to adapt. Even though they're in the wrong for abandoning you and having bad vehicles, you have to adapt and you have to correct that. Conversely, if they're demonstrating that they have everything that they need to push their way through the enemy to victory, you still need to be making smart decisions to support them either by watching their flank, by moving up with them and attacking the enemy with them, or by, watching another flank to make sure that they don't get jumped from behind. Because there's all kinds of different places that you can be that are useful, but they have to be close to your team. They can't be the other side of the map, because that's just silly, because your team can't help you from there. And chances are, if you encounter the enemy on the other side of the map and you're the only one there, you're going to encounter more than one, and that's bad news. So what's going on with your team? Where are they? How much can you count on them? Size it up at the beginning and then continue to check throughout the match to make sure that they're kind of in the back of your mind. You're not just gung-ho solo hero. That brings us to the third and final point in situational awareness. Know your environment. Now, for the time being, we're going to exclude from your environment your bot and your team's bots, because what we're really talking about are the two things that you can't necessarily always control. One is, where is the enemy? And two, what is the terrain like? Is the enemy in a position where you're advantaged and you can have a much easier time destroying them than they can destroying you? Or are they kind of all looking down on you in a little ravine and you've got nowhere to go? You know what I mean? The environment. I was reading a conversation on Reddit a few weeks ago from someone who was complaining that there wasn't nearly enough cover in this game. When in reality, cover is what you make into cover. It can be mountains, it can be little ridges, little rocks, it can be just a change in altitude, where if you back away from a ridge far enough, the guy can't shoot through the hill to get to you. You've effectively created your own cover, but you have to know where you are and where those cover options exist in order to make use of them. So that's kind of that's one of the things you pick up over time, because there are different maps. I found a lane in a map that I'd never gone through before, despite having played on that map dozens of times before. This was just yesterday. And I went through it, and apparently nobody else had gone through it before ever either, because I was the only one there, and I was kind of kicking myself, hoping that I wasn't going to round the corner into a half dozen enemy bots. But I actually made my way to the enemy circle and quickly got blown up by 3 rail blimps hovering above. It was awesome. Knowing your environment, knowing where the enemy is. Here's a thing that people really struggle with, and I'm going to share it with you, not to try and teach the stupid, but just because this is good information that you might want to know. If you've got 5 enemies clustered in one area on the map, and your guys are having a really hard time with them, it doesn't look like you're going to be successful in defeating them, having 5 enemies over there means those 5 enemies can't be on the other side. You know what I mean? If you reach a conclusion that you're not going to get through those enemies and you need an alternate route, instead of just saying, oh, well, we're resigned to fighting these guys because this is all there is, you can go where they're not. It's fantastic. Hopefully, what you'll find is that there were 5 guys clumped up, and the other 5 guys on their team, assuming they were at full strength, are kind of spread out here and there. Much easier to kill than trying to do it with all clumped up 5 and the other 5 supporting them. But you have to know your environment. You have to know what's going on around you. You have to take a look. How many enemies are around me? Look up regularly. How many bombers and interceptors are flying around above us? Mark your targets with Q so that the rest of your team, who can't necessarily see them because they're too far away, at least know where they are. These are the kinds of things that go above and beyond. Like I say, that 3-inch circle in the middle of your screen, that Q to spot targets, you put a target in your reticle and you hit Q. Most of the time, you will spot them. If it's the first time that player has been spotted, that time for that match, you actually get RP for it. It's fantastic. There's so many reasons to do it. Lots of people don't. You spot the enemy, now you know where the enemy is. You know what the terrain looks like. You know where you're advantaged and where you're at a disadvantage. You move yourself in a position where you're advantaged with the rest of your teammates, and you win. That's situational awareness. That's all of the things that come together into it. And like I say, you could pick one thing, take it into a match, and practice it. Today I'm going to practice looking at my teammates at the start of the match to see what's going on. What can I expect from these guys based on their bots? Maybe you'll do that for 2 or 3 matches, and then I'm tired. I don't feel like playing anymore today, but you know what? I spent 3 matches practicing getting a feel for my team. You're already heads and tails above the guy who just shows up in the match and looks at his reticle and never really does anything except for look for guys to shoot at. You keep doing that, you keep picking up these little details, you keep practicing these little details, eventually those guys on the other team that never do anything other than look at that little 3-inch circle in the middle of their screen, they're just fodder for you to mow down on a regular basis, because there's nothing, there's nothing magical, mathematical, or mysterious about the process of learning what's going on around you. It's just making the effort to do so consistently. So I hope that was helpful. I didn't want to babble too much, but at the same time, I wanted to not make it seem more simple than it is. There are some things you have to consider. There are all kinds of little details you can look at. You don't have to take them on all at once. Just pick one at a time. Go through it. Work it into your game. When you feel comfortable with it, take the next one in line. It's fantastic. Please leave your comments and feedback if this style of video was helpful to you. If it was, I'll make more. If it wasn't, why bother? If you want to be notified when I add the next video in this or any other series, you can subscribe to my channel. That's an easy way to do it. You can also follow me on the social media. Links for that are in the information section below the video. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.